Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be doing my February wrap-up. I read 12 books in February, which is a pretty average month for me. Today I'm drinking tea. This is Harney & Sons. It's orange pico tea, and then I have some agave sweetener in it. It's pretty good. First book I read and finished in February was Miracle Creek by Angie Kim. This one is a mystery book that follows, I believe it follows 5 or 6 different perspectives. And essentially, this young boy and a woman died in this, it's called the Miracle Submarine. It's a place where they give people oxygen, 100% oxygen treatments in order to try to cure a variety of diseases or illnesses. What happens one day is the Miracle Submarine actually explodes. One woman and one child die. And this book is following the trial that takes place afterwards, where you're trying to figure out who did it, what really happened, and what everyone is really hiding. I ended up giving this book 4 stars. The only reason it didn't get 5 stars is because sometimes it was a little bit slow for me. Other than that, it was an amazing book, and I really liked this story. The next book I read in February was The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. This is another one of the Penguin English Library paperbacks that I have that are just absolutely gorgeous. I actually started reading this book in November, but it just kind of took a break. I was doing readathons and just kind of forgot I was reading it and went back to it later on, but I ended up really loving this book. I haven't read that many classics, so it was definitely a surprise to enjoy this one so much, but it's a creepy, weird kind of book. When you start at the beginning, you haven't even met Dorian Gray yet. You meet 2 people who are talking about him, and then you meet him, and his friend Basil has painted a portrait of him. Dorian makes a comment about, wow, like it would be really nice to look like that forever. And if you know what happens in the book, you know what happens. I'm not going to spoil any more than that. I also gave this one 4 stars. I really enjoyed it, and I don't know if I read it all the way through again. Maybe I would give it 5 stars, but by the time I was finishing it, I had kind of maybe forgotten some of the stuff that happened at the beginning. So I'm hoping to reread this at some point, and maybe I'll give it 5 stars. The next book I read was one for one of the prompts of the Ladies of Horror Fiction Readathon that was taking place all month long. The prompt was to read a book by a woman of color author, and the book I chose for that was My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyinkan Braithwaite. This book is really small. It's like between 200 and 300 pages, and essentially you're following this woman whose sister keeps calling her because she's accidentally killing her boyfriends. You're following the perspective of this woman who keeps getting called to clean up the messes from her sister, but eventually her sister ends up falling in love or has a crush on the man that she is in love with herself. I ended up really enjoying this book, and actually I read it in one day because it is so short. I gave this one 4 stars, and I highly recommend it for anybody who likes humor mixed with horror, likes that sort of hilarious take on murder, I guess. So after that, I read One of Us is Lying by Karen McManus. I read this book because its sequel came out this year. Now, I haven't read the sequel yet, but since I hadn't read the first book, I thought it was as good a time as any to read this one. If you don't know, this book is sort of a Breakfast Club meets a murder mystery type of book. So these 5 kids, there's a jock, there's a nerd, there's a troublemaker boy, there's a boy who's kind of weird, and then there's like the pretty preppy girl. They are all in detention together one day when one of them dies. There's reasons for all of them to have wanted to kill this boy, and there's a variety of people who maybe wanted him dead, just trying to figure out who did it, you know, why he died, and sort of what the consequences of that are going to be. I also gave this one 4 stars. Nothing got under 3 stars this month, so it was a really good month. Next, I read The Fisherman by John Langan. This is a horror book about, it's this man who's telling you a tale of something that happened to him and his friend when they were fishing. And then there is a good chunk of it within the book that is actually someone telling him and his friend a story. So there's a story within a story, element here, and it's kind of like you know, an old fisherman's tale. Ending of this book was just, it was totally unexpected. There are definitely some fantastical elements to this book. Like, it's not just as straight out something spooky happens when fishing type of book. There's definitely some fantastical elements, but I really enjoyed that. I ended up giving that one 4 stars as well. Then I read, well, actually listened to the audiobook for Circe by Madeline Miller. Like I said, I listened to the audiobook for this, which is narrated by Perdita Weeks. I definitely think that the audio is the way to go with this book. The narrator does such a good job and really just gets you into it. And I know a lot of people thought that this book was slow, so if you did think that, I would give it another shot with the audiobook, because it's just like the story is being told to you. But if you don't know, Circe is about, she's actually a nymph, or she's sometimes referred to as a goddess. Her name is Circe, and she is the daughter of Helios, the sun god. And this is just her life. It starts with her as a teen-aged. I mean, she doesn't really die, but she's more of like a younger in her life. And she meets Prometheus. There are parts where she's with Daedalus and Icarus. Later on, she meets Odysseus. I don't think you have to be interested in Greek mythology to like this book, but if you are at all interested in Greek mythology, I definitely recommend this one. So then next, I participated in a readathon with my book club, where we did a spin the bottle challenge, and essentially you laid out however many books you wanted or prompts in a circle, and then you spun a bottle, and that's whatever book it landed on is what you read. So the first one I got for that is called Rust and Stardust by T. Greenwood. I read this book because of Pretty in Paper Cuts here, Coral here on BookTube. She talked about this book in, I think it was a monthly wrap-up or something like that, and it just really intrigued me. This book is a fictionalized account of the story that Lolita is based on. So this book tells the story of Sally Horner, who is kidnapped when she is 11, and she's taken by this man. A lot of horrible things happen to her. There's, you know, trigger warnings for, you know, kidnapping, sexual assault, pedophilia, rape. I mean, it's pretty awful, the things that happen to her in this book. It's not necessarily graphically spelled out. She doesn't focus on the details of exactly what happens, but it is mentioned what happens. So if that's an issue for you, I wouldn't read this one. It's all told from it's told from Sally's perspective and then her family members' perspectives, as they are wondering what happened to her. They're looking for her, and they're just trying to figure out exactly what happened. But I ended up giving this one 5 stars. It was just so well written. I forgot I was reading a fictionalized account at times because it was so realistic, and Sally's voice was just so well done. Some people may think this is, you know, like gratifying a horrible thing that happened or something like that, but I really think what T. Greenwood was trying to do here was to give a voice to Sally Horner, who really didn't get a chance to tell her story. This book was able to give a voice to a victim who wasn't able to speak for herself. So the next book I read for that Spin the Bottle challenge was Rosemary's Baby by Ira Levin. This book I got at a used bookstore where I live, and I think I got it for like $3, so that was really awesome to find. I think this cover is so awesome, and I love this silhouette of the little carriage, or the little bassinet on the cover here. I really love that. If you don't know the story of Rosemary's Baby, this is the novel that the movie is based off of, but essentially what happens is Rosemary and her husband Guy move into this new apartment complex, and Rosemary hears the people next to her talking at night, and she thinks it's really strange, but doesn't really think anything of it. Eventually she meets these people, and her husband befriends them, and weird things just start happening, and then Rosemary gets pregnant, and she doesn't remember the night it happened. So again, trigger warnings for rape in this, though not in the way that you think, but definitely if that is something that bothers you, this book has it, so be aware of that. I have never watched the movie, but I plan on watching it soon, since I read this and really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars as well, and I highly recommend it. If you're into old school horror, this book is from like 1964, so it was a quick read. I think I read it in a day or 2 and really liked it. So the next book I spun in my Spin the Bottle challenge was Red Dragon by Thomas Harris. Now, this book is the first book in the Hannibal Lecter series. It's the same series that has Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal, and Hannibal Rising. So this book actually follows Will Graham. If you've seen the Hannibal TV series, it's the character that Hugh Dancy plays. He's very different in this book than the Will Graham in the Hannibal series. The Will Graham in this book is married. He has a stepchild, and he has actually already interacted with and caught Hannibal Lecter at the time of this novel. This book, the big bad, or the guy that they're trying to catch, is, they call him the Tooth Fairy, but Will does consult with Hannibal Lecter at a point in this book, and you meet sort of important Hannibal series characters like Freddie Lowndes you meet in this, and you meet Jack Crawford, and you meet Dr. Alan Bloom, who is Alana Bloom in the TV series. I really enjoyed this. I listened to the audiobook for half of it and read the book for the other half, just kind of switch back and forth. Alan Sklar reads the audiobook for this, and I think he did a really good job. I think the voice fit the story well, although I don't think the voice fit Will Graham very well. It's not necessarily a first-person type of book, so that's okay. Then I read a book that I've been wanting to read for a while, and it's been on my shelf, and I just haven't gotten around to it. That's what's nice about TBR challenges, or this. That's what this is for my book club. We do a monthly TBR challenge, and that's what I find that's really nice about this, is sometimes it can force me to read books that I own. And so the next one I read was The Wife Between Us by Greer, Hendricks, and Sarah Pekkanen. Last year I read An Anonymous Girl, and I just thought it was okay. It wasn't the type of story that I thought it was, so I ended up not being a huge fan of it. This one, however, I ended up really liking. I think I gave it 4 stars. So you're reading this book, and there's 2 different perspectives. I think their names are Nellie and Vanessa. And one of them is divorced, and she's kind of an alcoholic, which isn't a trope that I love in thrillers, but I think they did an okay job of it in this one. And then Nellie is a younger woman who is apparently getting married to the man that Vanessa was once married to, and I think Vanessa is kind of watching her, and you're not really sure exactly what's going on. The final book I read for that Spin the Bottle challenge, I still have one more book from this month, but the final book I read for that challenge was Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. This is a very popular book on BookTube, so I'm sure you've heard of it. It's a sci-fi thriller where this man gets kidnapped and sort of ends up in this world where his life isn't his life. He's not who he thought he was. His name is still the same, but everything that's happened to him is very different. I originally gave this book 4 stars. I think I'm going to change it to 3 stars, just because the more I think about it, the more I felt like a lot of it was quite boring to me. Certain aspects of it I can't tell you because it's a thriller and I don't want to give away spoilers because it's a very important part of this book, but I ended up just feeling a little bit bored partially through this book, and I read it really fast. Like it's really gripping, but when I look back on it, there are just certain aspects of it I wish were different. I also thought the ending of this was kind of cheesy and not exactly how I would have ended it. Anyway, I ended up giving it 3 stars, but it's really popular on BookTube, and I'm still going to keep reading Blake Crouch. I want to read Recursion. I'm hoping to like that one more, so we'll see. And finally, the last book I read in the month of February was for the Literally Dead Book Club, which Books and Lala puts on. She just started it. This is the first month, and that was The Other People by CJ Tudor. I think this is the UK cover. I bought it off Book Depository because I wanted the paperback. This book, it follows this man who is driving home one night on the highway, and he is behind this car, and this little girl's face pops up in the sort of back window of the car, and it's his daughter. He thinks it's his daughter. It looks just like her. And he starts to try to follow the car, but it gets away from him in the traffic. And then when he gets home, he discovers that his wife and his daughter have been murdered. The majority of the story takes place 3 years after his wife and daughter have died. And since he saw his daughter, or thinks he saw his daughter in the backseat of that car, the man, Gabe, is continuing to look for her. He doesn't think that she's dead. He's trying to figure out exactly what happened to her. He ends up visiting all these service stations or gas stations along the highway. and his story just kind of takes off from there. I give this book 3.5 stars. I think CJ Tudor's writing is really good, but I just thought the story was okay. A lot of it was kind of unbelievable for me. Like, I'm willing to suspend my disbelief for a book or a movie. I'm not someone who needs to be, you know, totally convinced all the time. But with a book like this, where it was seemingly supposed to be taking place in modern day and in our current, like, contemporary time, I thought some of the reaches that they made with this didn't exactly work for me, but I will continue to read CJ Tudor. Okay, so those are all the books I read in February. Let me know what your favorite book was that you read in February, or any of the books you read in February down below. Don't forget to subscribe if you would like to see more from me. And thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.